into kind of our power mulch for today. So hopefully he warmed up a little bit since he was saying he was getting a cold and getting so nervous. Here's this. It's fun.
Right, it's next.
Yeah. One of those buttons.
Okay. Yeah, I get super cold and I'm nervous, so I'm drinking some hot tea. All right, I'm gonna try to cover something that's tangential to real estate, in my opinion today. A bit nuanced and but hopefully we're gonna simplify it down so it's not super complex and provide you guys some value and just a new opportunity or way to see things and have some different conversations with clients. So I did bring my notepad with me today and I will offer up a note to anyone that asks a good question today. So as we jump in, ask yourself, what is stronger, a cash offer or offer with financing? What gets you more deals? What's more attractive to clients when you're out trying to show somebody your unique value proposition? Is it a well-rounded agent or is it the agent says, I don't know, you'll have to ask your other professional or I don't know. And then how do you want to operate your business? Do you want to wait for the phone to just ring? Somebody to say, hey, I need to buy a house or I'm looking to list, or do you want to help engage with people and help them find and create opportunities that they didn't know existed? So what we're going to cover today is, do people really own stocks? Like, you guys like real estate investing, right? Yeah, we're all familiar with it. So sometimes in our bubble, we think like, why do people even own stocks? Right? Like people still do that, So hey, do people still own stocks? Why people might not sell their stocks to buy real estate. So I think understanding what people think or face when they're having to make that type of decision can help give us an edge as agents. The sources of alternative funding. So if you look at buying real estate with anything other than cash in my bank account or going to one of our mortgage lending partners, where else are people getting the funds to make a purchase? We're going to talk about a specific one of those, which is called securities-based lending today, which is where you can utilize your stocks to give you access to capital. And then I'm going to talk you guys through hopefully some ways to just discover some opportunities for your clients. So just so you guys know, my name is DuCharme. I operate the office for DuCharme Wealth Management. It's our family practice. My dad started over 2 decades ago. We do professional advice and management for clients. So we cover everything from investments, tax, estate planning, income planning, and insurance. And our unique value proposition is that we're big enough to have access and capacity. We've been around long enough to know and have the tenure, so we have the know-how, but we are small enough to be flexible and independent. So we're not burdened down by an investment bank telling us what we need to do or anything like that. Okay, so first off, do we still really own stocks? Do people own stocks?
Yes.
Like a lot, actually. A lot of people own a lot of stocks out there. It's very common in the US and around the world. It's one of the easiest investments to get started with. But sometimes what people face is they get started and then they don't know how to get into something else. So a couple stats up there just showing the breakdown of where people own assets, how do they own it, and who owns those assets. And then I took a look too and did some research on investment property stats. So sometimes, and I think the one that I found most interesting was all the way down here, like real estate and corporation REITs, they only own 1.2% of the investment housing from a single family perspective, right? So when people are like, oh, BlackRock's buying up all the single family homes, pure, maybe not, but anyways, like a lot of individual investors own residential real estate. And I would say that's primarily when you are working with investors and clients, like us as agents, that's typically who we're probably dealing with, right? But only 10 to 15% of American families own real estate as an investment outside of their primary residence. Okay, so a lot of people own stocks, not a lot of people own real estate, and that's where as agents, you're trying to flip those numbers. Fair? I mean, it's big lift, but there's a lot of opportunity. Okay, So, a couple of reasons why people aren't gonna sell their stocks, right? If we just go to a client and we're saying, hey, we think, real estate, especially in St. George, is this great investment opportunity. You have access to leverage, you have access to tax benefits, you have access to cash flow, you have access to all these great things. They go, well, I like all that, but I'd have to sell my stocks. And you go, well, easy, just sell your stocks, get out of the stock market. And you should, just get out of the stock market and buy real estate. Like, that's easy to say, but I think objectively as agents, we should look at that and say, that probably makes us look a little bit silly and potentially uninformed. And I think there's some underlying concerns people have. So let's talk about the concerns people have. First one's perceived risk, right? Like, how many people have talked to people about real estate investing and everyone says, oh, real estate's a safe investment. Come on, and then at the same time, they don't go buy it. So what people are telling you, when like 10 to 15% of people own investment real estate, is that there is actually a lot of perceived risk in real estate, right? But what if the tenant doesn't pay, but I still have to make the mortgage payment? Or what if the toilet breaks at 2 a.m. and I'm on vacation, or the AC goes out in the middle of July, or all this stuff? Like, there's some perceived risk there. And so what does this really look like, on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis? And so they have some risk there. Lack of knowledge and expertise, right? If somebody goes and they want to buy stocks, they can buy nowadays a fund that's an index fund, tracks the S&P 500. It's a good proxy for like the US economy. And so without a lot of knowledge or expertise, you can just say, I'm going to go make a investment. I'll just buy the S&P 500 index fund and we'll call it good, right? It doesn't require a lot of expertise per se in that regard. But if you're going to go buy real estate, like, how does somebody go identify a good investment property? What makes a good investment property, right? Like, all the people start to have all these questions. So they have a concern there. And then lack of qualification, right? So you guys ever, again, it's like, hey, do you want to invest in real estate? And everyone goes like, yeah, I love real estate. I want to invest in real estate. What a great investment. And you go like, who owns real estate? And less than 10% of people put their hand up. It's because of, hey, sometimes it can be hard to get qualified and get involved with real estate. So they already have a belief system built. There's risk. I don't know enough to, like, how do I really identify and make sure that I'm buying a good property? And am I qualified? And those three things are where agents, you guys can make all the difference, right? You can coach people and help them understand risks are real, but there's a way to acknowledge it, manage it, right? Like, don't buy a rental property, for too much money that has all, with the polybutylene pipes, okay, well, that goes into now like lack of knowledge and expertise. So as an agent, you're bringing that expertise and knowledge to the table to help guide the client along. So you're removing that sort of objection from them if you're well informed there. And then anyone ever help their client like give it a mortgage lender and say, let's see what you're qualified for, and right, come on, we're gonna help them get qualified. The last two ones are a bit more challenging, right? And that's like emotional considerations, especially when you're saying, hey, you have stocks, you should just sell them and buy real estate. And they're saying, those are stocks my dad bought and, I inherited them. I don't really want to sell them, right? Or, hey, I bought Tesla early on. I'm a big Tesla believer. Everything Elon Musk touches is gold, and I drive my Tesla and I love everything about it. And there's no way I'm selling my Tesla stock. There's emotionally attached to it, right? Like, what is easier, talking somebody out of selling their Tesla stock or showing them how they could use their stock differently to maybe achieve their desired outcome still, right? So rather than try to talk people out of their emotions, however unfounded they may be, how do we work around it? And then the last one's tax considerations. So give you an example on this one. I have a client that bought Apple stock. You guys all familiar with Apple? Show of hands, yeah, everyone ever heard of the little company? When he was a senior in high school, he bought Apple stock with a couple $100 for 43 cents a share. He still owns it. So if I went to him and said, hey, let's make another investment, you just got to sell your Apple stock, he's going to give up almost 30% of all his gains in taxes. Right? So now we have to play this game of like, well, how much do you really love Apple stock? What else do you do with it? How do we, free this up, so to speak, in the portfolio? How do you reuse these funds? Okay. The concept isn't a whole lot different than when you buy real estate and you're going to do a cash out refi so that you can get capital and go buy another property, right? Just got to shift asset classes in your mind a little bit here. So we want to try to avoid the tax considerations. So if you can work around it and say, hey, without having the tax consequences and without having to sell your favorite stock, we may be able to get you access to the capital, qualifying them, and I will help you find a property with my knowledge and expertise that I think is gonna be a great rental property that could get you a good return. It's not gonna fall apart on you. And by doing so, we're gonna manage the risk. You guys are a lively bunch. I really love the interaction with all of this. It's incredible. It makes me feel so validated that what I do isn't boring on a day-to-day basis.
You haven't asked questions, you've just been telling us.
Please ask questions. I'm offering money, Rebecca, if people ask questions.
You haven't asked us questions, so you're just telling us things so far.
Okay. Sources of alternative funding. Private hard money, you guys have worked with that before? Yep. Cash value life insurance, that's been really big the last couple of years and people getting those types of policies. People have had them, they're not new. But that is a source of funding, the same way that somebody can borrow money from any other source, right? Real estate equity loans, whether it be a HELOC, a second mortgage, whatever, right? We want to close on a property today, we can potentially get a HELOC or a second mortgage or something on a property somewhere else to free up the cash to buy this one today, right? 401k loans, is anyone familiar with that? Right, like a lot of people, if they have a 401k, they're still employed at that employer. Most 401k plans are gonna allow for a loan provision. So they can not have the tax implications again, right? They don't get the tax penalty of an early withdrawal. They don't have to realize it as income. I believe it typically is not gonna affect their DTI at all, right? Like when the mortgage lender looks at it, because it's gonna open a new loan essentially.
But on some 401k loans, where they're still working at the business, don't they have to mature that 401k before they can pull that out?
Yeah, so it has to be, yeah, you typically have to borrow against your vested balance. But if somebody has $100,000 401k and they've been working at a company for a couple of years at least, typically they're gonna be able to borrow up to almost about $50,000. You guys see another question?
So we looked at self-directed, right? Is what we're talking about.
No,
Our self-directed IRA is what, yeah, okay, never mind, go ahead.
no, not at all actually, but you have a question about them?
No, no.
So they're not making money on
Big
the,
Mac, you're nervous now, Joe.
on the money that they withdraw, they're not making money on that, but are they getting interest in pay, are they making?
It
money?
depends how the 401k plan's set up, but commonly what's gonna happen is their funds are still invested. So it's just like going and getting a loan from the bank, like a signature loan for 50 grand, there's gonna be an interest rate associated with that. But they're paying that interest rate back to the company that authorized them, their company that authorized them to borrow against a 401k. So they're still getting their return on their 401k, they're not having to disrupt that. But as they pay off that out of paycheck, payroll deductions, right, they pay that loan back, you're typically paying an interest rate. Some companies will allow you to essentially change the investment options like that will like wash, so you're kind of at that point sort of paying interest to yourself. In a way, but it's a little bit nuanced, but generally, yeah, you can borrow typically up to half your vested balance, up to $50,000 on a 401k. So generally like pretty easy, and that can really help make a difference for people, right? Like if you think, wait.
No, go ahead and finish that up, then I will ask a question.
So like how many times have we taken a listing and just gone like, man, if only they had the capital to put like 15 grand into this place, spruce it up, finish the landscaping, whatever it may be. Like they could really, they could sell this for an extra 30,000. Well, it's like 100% return on investment, but sometimes people are just strapped and like, well, I don't have the 15,000. But if we know as agents, well, hey, like you have a 401k, have you ever considered doing like just a temporary short-term loan against your 401k? There would be no tax implications, right? It's pretty low risk. It's not gonna mess with their income levels or their debt in qualifying for the new home. And all of a sudden they can make that investment in themselves into their own real estate property and do it. And now on an average size home, your advice has essentially produced enough added return in that one decision that you paid for your listing fee just in that, right? So that can be a huge value add for clients. Joe,
So how does that differ with the self-directed piece?
if you did that same thing with a self-directed IRA, and got caught by the IRS, they would force a taxable distribution of your entire IRA, and you would really hate life. So when you do a self-direct,
Don't do that. So.
don't do that. So self-directed IRA would be a lot different because you're taking the funds and putting them at a special custodian. That is then gonna give you check writing authority on your IRA, so money would actually be coming out of your IRA, and you're gonna say like, you are gonna pay a contractor then to finish your landscaping in your house. That'd be called what's called self-dealing with a self-directed IRA, because you own the property, and so you're doing something for your own benefit. And you're kind of thinking to yourself, well, yeah, it's my IRA, it's for my benefit. But it's an interesting distinction the IRS has made, and that would disqualify your IRA from its tax sheltered status. IRS would force a taxable distribution of your entire account at that point. So the difference is the 401k, you're taking a general loan from the 401k, and now it's just cash in your checking account. You're free to do whatever you want with it.
And then with self-directed IRAs, that person can't live in that property, is that correct?
They can't live in that property. They can't manage that property.
They can't do
They
it.
can't repair that property. Some people would argue and they make the point, you can't pick which contractors are hired to work on that property. You can't screen the tenants for that property. You can't be involved in the collections process if they don't pay you, or the foreclosure process. It has to really stay at arm's length. So, okay, I'll make this distinction. Self-directed IRAs are not up here as a source of alternative funding for real estate for a reason. And I'm happy to do a whole class on why I think that's, generally speaking, a horrible idea. There's some great things to do with self-directed 401ks if people don't want to invest in broader equity markets. Typically, I tend to say like private money or hard money lending, self-directed IRAs is a much more risk managed approach and has a higher chance of avoiding major IRS issues. If you're gonna go that route.
Where do you find the rules? Because, so you can do that same loaning kind of stuff with a whole life insurance policy and that kind of stuff. But where do you find the rules of how that all works for each specific 401k plan or life insurance policy?
So life insurance policy is gonna be like, you're gonna have to go to your policy documents from the carrier, right? So if you have like a policy with Allianz or Mass Mutual or something, right? It's like whatever rules they have set forth in the contract that you sign is gonna define out how that works. Okay, the 401k, you can typically get it in what's called a plan summary description from HR. So if you haven't contacted HR and you just get a plan summary description, they can like, and you guys are agents, like your job isn't to read through a plan summary description, so that's a document that you could tell somebody to ask to get. Or they can call up and just say like, call up HR and see if you're allowed to do a loan from your 401k. Or, and here's another novel idea for you guys. You could say, if that's an idea that interests you, I have someone that you could have a consultation with that might be able to help you determine if that's in your best interest or the best place for you to get funding. Yeah, call me.
And then they have to be working, they can't be retired and draw a loan at that point.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, and if they leave their job too, so like that's a strategy that wouldn't work if like they're leaving their job in California and they're moving here, they're not gonna work at the job anymore. Because when you leave the company, what they'll do is they'll take the outstanding loan balance and issue it as a distribution, then at that point creating the taxable event with the tax penalty. So they have to be remaining at the same job. But like I'll tell you that employees, like if you have clients that work at Intermountain here or SkyWest, like both of those are very favorable, employers to this type of situation. And those employees usually make pretty decent money and typically are on buying real estate. So anyways, okay, other questions before last one, security-based lending. That's what we're gonna hop into next. Any other questions? All right, have you guys heard of securities-based lending before? Like, a lot of people haven't, and I think it's one of the coolest things available. That if you understand it as an agent, can really, I think, help set you apart from other agents. And instead of making having a client perceive you as the person that says, well, just sell your stocks and do what I say, right? You can really work with them and say, here's something that you maybe not have considered. And I'll tell you that a lot of financial advisors, like people in my industry, they haven't considered this either. They can't facilitate this, and it's not something they work with or around. And a lot of times it's because they don't really understand real estate or want to have anything to do with that, so they're not really looking for ways to plan and complement the real estate side as well. But, okay, HELOCs, you guys know how a HELOC works, right? Pretty basic, you have a home, your home for all intents and purposes is invested in what I'm gonna use air quotes here, the market, right? Like, it exists and thus it's in the market. We hope that our home goes up in value every year, right? Doesn't every year, but most years it does. If you borrow money from a HELOC, do you pay interest on that? Yeah.
Usually the money you pull out of it.
Yeah. Pay interest, goes to the bank, bank makes some money, bank's happy, right? What happens if you don't pay back? They foreclose their house, they have the asset, right? They've leaned the asset and they say, hey, we'll foreclose. We'll make sure that we get paid back, because there's sufficient collateral here to borrow you this money. You'll pay some interest, but the reason why you don't have to feel super bad about paying interest is because your home's still invested, right? So, maybe you're at a HELOC, you're paying 7%, 8%, your home goes up 8-10% in value, right? If it goes up 10 and you only paid 8 on interest, you come out ahead, right? Okay, now in a tough time, maybe the home it goes up 3% or none at all, and you paid 8% interest. You paid interest. It is what it is, right? But the important thing is that when we take money off a HELOC, is it income?
No.
Is it taxable? Yeah. So, and we didn't have to sell our house, right? So at some point in the future, when we get more cash, we can pay the HELOC off, right?
You
And
can use the interest you're paying as a tax deduction as well.
yes, yeah, you can use the interest you're paying as a tax deduction. Yep. And when you pay it off, you still own the house. What's that? Use the interest on a HELOC as a tax deduction?
My CPA said no.
Okay. Your CPA is both wrong and right.
He's being
He's being so mean.
Fully.
Okay. It depends how you're categorizing the interest and what it's used for. So that's a deeper conversation, and I'm not trying to step on your CPA's toes. What I'll say is if you use the HELOC to build a pool and your primary residence, that's gonna be deductible under the same rules as like just regular mortgage interest, right? If you use your HELOC to buy an investment property, then you would be making the argument that you're recategorizing that interest as investment interest expense. So you have to recategorize it away from home mortgage interest and recategorize it. You want that word. Okay.
Note to self, call CPA and do it again.
Don't tell them it's me.
No names.
What did you say, categorize it as? Investment, something?
Investment interest expense. Okay, if someone's having a tough time with their CPA and they're involved in real estate, there's somebody that I recommend people call. It's Joe's daughter, Savannah. She is great. And she will help work around this kind of stuff. All day for people. Okay, so securities backed line of credit. So we know how HELOCs work. You know how a HELOC works? You're 99% of the way there for how securities backed line of credit works, right? So we don't want to sell our house because we bought it a couple years ago for 200 grand. Now it's for 600 grand. We only need $100,000 to finish a project or get a down payment for an investment property, whatever. So, right. So we don't want to go sell this house and have a big taxable event just to free up some cash, right? Well, just like my client that bought Apple at 43 cents a share, right? You don't want to sell 1,600 shares of Apple and have a big old capital gain just because you need a little bit of cash right now, right? And so instead, what you can do is open up a securities backed line of credit, okay? The financial institution, you pledge it against this line of credit. So you're authorizing the financial institution, hey, if I don't pay back this loan, what are they gonna do?
Shares.
They're gonna sell the shares and pay themselves off, just like a bank would foreclose on a home. Okay, but now because of that, they'll say, hey, yep, you can go ahead and borrow against it, just like you would a HELOC. You'll pay us interest Okay, now what's interesting on these, typically they'll actually let you just roll the interest on top, so you're not always even required to make a payment from a cash flow perspective. But you have the cash, just like a HELOC, right? You transfer it into your checking account, away you go, pay for what you need. Stock hopefully keeps going up. Question?
Are certain stocks more valuable as a security, like, let's say a penny stock versus like a blue chip?
You're gonna have a hard time probably getting a securities backed lending against a penny stock.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna argue that it's like. It'd be a really uncommon thing, truthfully, from a risk perspective, that somebody would take so much risk in a penny stock. It's still trading at penny stock perspectives. They wanna get cash against it without just selling it and realizing the gain. Usually when penny stocks go in there, they tend to, I'll harvest that gain, right? I wanna get out of it and diversify away from it. But yeah, the more volatile or risky stock or position is, the less they're gonna give you. So that's a little bit of a difference between like this and a HELOC, right? They don't look at your home and say, oh, it's built in, it's built in 91 and it's got polybutylene in it and there's a little crack on the foundations. So we're only gonna give you 70% loan to value, right? Like they punch in their system, they get their rough value and they say, hey, our standard is 85% loan to value, whatever. And away they go, right, on HELOC. On this, they'll look at it and they'll say, hey, bonds are less risky than stocks. So we'll give you, 90% availability on stocks. Tesla, a bit more risky. We might only let you borrow half your money against something like a Tesla, right? S&P 500, like an index fund, typically you're gonna get somewhere between like 65 and 85%.
And it's similar in as a HELOC, that the equities when you're borrowing against, so you bought them cheaper price than it's at currently on your equities.
Yeah, so like you could buy $100,000 of S&P 500 tomorrow and then just say, well, I think the market under Trump is gonna go crazy high. So I wanna make sure I stay in the stock market, but I'm happy to borrow money at 8%. You could buy the S&P 500 index fund and probably borrow about 80 to 85,000 back off right away.
Is that true with IRA, like Roth, not Roth? Yeah, these are.
Yeah, ineligible account. Yeah, we're gonna get to that. Yeah, no, good question. Okay, so, yeah, you can use it for whatever you want. Once the cash is kind of in your checking account there. Except there's one thing you cannot do with the security backed line of credit, and that's buy more securities. That's, yeah, it's called margin. It's just a different kind of account if you want to do something like that. But yeah, you can't go buy more stocks. Okay, already did that. DTI is irrelevant, credit score is irrelevant, no income verification needed. Funds usually are available within like 3 days, and it usually just takes a couple hours to set up. So it's super convenient and distribute funds easily. Things that are eligible: individual accounts, retail accounts, trust accounts, corporate accounts, cash accounts. The stuff that's not eligible is like all your retirement accounts. So all your stuff that already has a tax shelter on it is not going to be eligible. So IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, TSPs, which is like a government 401k, and 529, which is a college saving plan, or uniform transfer to minor act accounts. So minor accounts for minors. Questions on that? No? All right, great. Let's cruise on. Basic use case for real estate. So it goes back to, remember, like before, hey, maybe it's not that they need to come up with 800 grand to buy a house cash, but maybe they need to come up with 100 grand to finish a project with the house, right? Or maybe it's they need to come up with the cash to do a down payment. Or maybe it is that they need an 800 grand. It's normally a riskier play than they would want to take, but they're selling their home in California. They're going to have all the cash to settle it out. So instead of going and getting hard money and paying 2 points and 12%, right? They can just open up a line of credit, borrow against a brokerage account, buy their home here cash, sell their home in California, pay their SBLOC off, no taxable events. And you made a cash offer, help your client get the home they wanted. Easy on your end, easy for the client. Win-win.
And how many days does that take for them to get the cash?
Typically like 3 days.
Oh, wow.
So a couple hours to set up and then funds are ready to go in Utah typically, just like on a HELOC, right? Because they have that.
What are typical interest rates on those? Are
So-
you seeing
It's very, very similar to HELOC. If you looked at kind of standard HELOC rates, and I would say like drop maybe 1% off of a HELOC rate.
Is it variable
So-
like HELOC or?
Yeah, it's all priced off SOFR, just like on loans would be. So, but because it's so liquid, like, so if a bank borrows you against a HELOC, and then they have to go foreclose on the property, they have to go through a foreclosure process, which is costly. Then they have to have the property in inventory, so now they have a carry cost on it, and then they have to figure out how to sell it, and they may or may not know what it is. And so the banks charge a little bit more on a HELOC because there's a little bit more risk for them to carry. Whereas if you have Apple stock or something like that, they know every single minute of basically every single day exactly what it's worth, and they don't have to go find a buyer. They literally just put it for sale through the exchange and it's done, right? So because that process is easier to give you the margin call, a little bit less on interest rates. So, yeah, you can use it for all kinds of stuff. I particularly like it for self-funding bridge loans. I think is a great use case for it. Yeah, small remodels, hey, get a property ready for sale, especially like investment properties. Tenant tore the place up, we're gonna need 50 grand to, get this property up to par, so we can get it sold at, a good rate, market value. That's a great way to access some capital.
So say a parent wants to give their kid a loan from their security, do they have to charge, like, that would be a hard money financing opportunity? Kind of like that, but do they have to charge certain interest rates, or can they just say, I'm giving it to my kid and they're buying a house with it, or?
If you're gonna gift it, yeah, ask a CPA, I'm gonna like clarify this with a CPA, maybe not her CPA, but a different CPA. But if you borrow somebody money, the IRS is gonna say you have to charge a reasonable interest rate, stated interest rate on that, so even if it's your kids, there is a unique way to handle that, but yeah, you're gonna have to charge them some kind of interest. If you don't charge them any interest, the IRS typically tends to look at that and say it's a gift, and then you have to pay some gift tax on it. Potentially. All right. What questions do you guys have? Wow, I made it so simple. You guys have no questions at all. Incredible. Maggie?
This is just based off of you pulling money from the stock market, like in stocks that you own, is that right?
It's based on you borrowing against those stocks, so you're not pulling it out of the stock market, right?
Right.
Who gives you the money?
So like in my case, I custody at Charles Schwab, with Charles Schwab. So, typically the things that's gonna stand in a client's way to this is that most financial advisors, their firms won't allow them to facilitate these types of accounts. And so a lot of financial advisors won't talk about it or say that they can do it because their compliance department won't let them. So even though Charles Schwab as an institution can do it and will do it, if the advisor managing the portfolio says like, oh, we don't do that here, then the client won't have access. So sometimes the financial advisor partner on the other end is really gonna make a difference for you guys here, but just something to be aware of. Other questions?
So who else does it? So, like, what would we say to the client? By the way, is your stuff with Charles Schwab? If so, I have great options for you,
Well, it's like if it's not, you can just transfer it to Charles Schwab.
but they don't want to. So is there anyone else that does it?
How bad most of your large financial institutions are gonna offer it, right? So like
But their advisor might not.
their advisor might not.
I would just say, hey, I've got a real estate agent in my office that I partner with. Why don't you have a conversation with them?
Yeah, if somebody's, I think like if somebody's interested, like, oh, well, that would be a really unique way to get money and that would really solve all our problems otherwise. Then if you want to help bring me into that conversation at that point, I can talk the client through the rest of it there.
And I think it's cool because I mean, maybe Brandon, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would guarantee there isn't another real estate brokerage in the area that has the resources that Brandon does. Right? I mean,
I don't guarantee
Not lying.
this, but otherwise, yeah.
yeah, I mean, or in other words, what other brokerage has a real estate agent that also has the the knowledge and resources that Brandon does, that probably.
Yeah, there's a system called the ACAP system. I describe it as like wire transfers for stocks. So, to transfer something to Charles Schwab from wherever they're currently holding it, usually is a pretty painless and quick process. And so if something like that allows them to then have all the rest of the things they're wanting to do and have their return out of their real estate investment decisions they're making, then that usually becomes a pretty minor friction point for people. Joe?
Which is a case by case basis, that sort of thing, but have you seen a good blend, like, you know, if someone's portfolio, like, where do you like to buy? So say I've got some investment properties and say I've got like $800 I'm not doing, but what do you like to see in terms of a blend in kind of a portfolio? In terms of cash and stock, you know, stocks and some properties and things like that.
Sure. Yes, it's tough because it's a really individualized question.
Yeah.
And I tend to
know
not,
it is.
I tend to not follow the textbook super close on this type of stuff. So like the textbook is gonna say real estate's the risky asset, one of the riskiest asset classes out there.
Right.
And so in order to offset that risk, you should actually not have a lot of stocks, you should have a ton of cash. And I think that there's a better way to maybe handle that and look at it, especially if you're able to look at real estate on an individualized basis and say, well, maybe real estate as an asset class can be risky, but because of the properties I own and the way I manage them or the tenants or whatever mix, I feel differently about the actual risk that I'm carrying. So rather than perceived risk, you can look at actual risk. And at that point, I tend to start more at a standpoint of, well, what's your expectation for around something going wrong, right? So if you have, you know, if you tend to turn over tenants a lot more frequently, then we talk about having a little bit more emergency reserve on leveraged properties to carry that negative carry. You know, if a tenant turns the property over, you're vacant for 3 months, right? You know, what are the capital expenditure potentials on a property, right? Plumbing issues, new roofs, landscape maintenance, whatever it might be, and making sure that you have enough liquidity for that. And then from there, I tend to say, you want to build out a stock portfolio to insulate the real estate or complement it. But again, that depends on how many properties somebody already has. So it's going to look different for the guy that has 18 properties than the guy that has 1 property or no properties. So I tend to, after that, then start to look and say, what are the easy tax advantages we can take? So let's build out, you know, like Roth IRAs, fund 401ks if they have it available, that kind of stuff. And then beyond that, say, okay, well, now we have additional cash after we've taken tax advantages. What should we be doing? And from there, I tend to say half goes to the market or liquid assets and half can go to something like real estate or a private investment opportunity. And as you allocate out that way, you'll find that you have more flexibility to sort of make like really good, instead of doing a bunch of kind of mediocre deals, you can have the flexibility to say, oh man, I can leverage something that's liquid right now to buy this one deal that is a home run at a perfect timing because I have the flexibility to do it, and then hit a home run and just go back to being pretty flexible, right? And just look for the home run deals. So I think you do a little bit less deals, buy less properties, but you end up buying absolutely dynamite home runs. I don't know if that answers your question, Joe. It's tough.
I mean, well, I guess I'm asking my own personal question.
You know where to find me.
Yeah.
No, like I think one of my favorite like classic examples of like people that have done well with real estate here locally in terms of financial planning is the people that have worked a job like at IHC and Sky West. I've seen this multiple times. They've made good money and then all of a sudden, so they're like, they do their 401k, they do all that like just kind of no brainer, easy stuff, put it on autopilot for saving. And then they come into cash for some reason, like small inheritance, or they did a side job for something or some consulting work or whatever. And so they end up with 50 grand extra, 100 grand extra. And it's like, well, what do I do now with this? And you just go buy a rental property. You just let it bake and marinate for, 15, 20 years and becomes a really nice asset for them in retirement that naturally deleverages. It's not correlated to the rest of their retirement plan they have in place. And so that's like a really good way, but along the way, they get to pick up all the tax advantages of real estate because it's not in the 401k. And so now you do need to be able to talk some tax advantages. And, personal risk tolerance, Joe, too.
You could pull out money you could borrow money against your stock for any of those things you talk about, you know, like tenant moves out and you cover the rent for a little while, you know, all that stuff, right? So it's pretty big one.
Yeah, yep, you can use it for anything, you can borrow money against a securities backed line of credit to do anything you want with it except buy more stocks. So, yep, if that means making the mortgage payment for, 3 months, well, a tenant turned over, you're trying to get it ready, right? So like if you're the agent, somebody's going, we gotta fire sale this property because, tenants moved out, I'm negative cash, I don't have a lot of cash on hand. And, we just gotta get this thing on the market and get it sold, and you're going, yeah, if you had like 20 grand and the ability to carry it for 4 months while the work gets done, you could sell it for an extra 150 grand or something. Like we talk to those people, right? I mean, that's a real thing that happens. And so if you can be the person that's got a way to help them figure out where to get access to this capital and do that, I mean, that really, I think is that, right? That's the win-win of Keller Williams, right? Win for you because the property sells at a higher, right? 3% of $500,000 more commission than 3% of 300,000.
Plus, I would love you.
Win for the client because you just talked them off the ledge of a quick emotional decision and into like a really good financial decision that helped them net a ton more money. I guess it's not a win for the person that buys the property, I guess.
Yeah, 'cause it's a very.
Because they got, oh, yeah, there you go, win for them too. But they're gonna pay market value instead of like getting a sweet deal on it, so.
It's not enough for investors.
Yeah, okay. So don't go tell people after today, I know more than your financial guy now, but he's wrong. And wealth can only be built by buying real estate with me as your agent, also a crazy that you don't want to say. And if you use me as your agent, your wildest dreams will come true.
Guaranteed.
You don't want to say that one. You might consider though, a comprehensive financial consultation might uncover opportunities you haven't considered that could help you achieve your goals. Would you be open to looking at your options, right? You might say, wealth is more than just owning an asset or a home. Has anyone helped you organize your resources and goals, right? And you might also say, if you use me as your agent, your wildest dreams may come true. Asterisk. Past performance is not guaranteed of future results. Advice limited to real estate transactions only. Please seek individual tax, financial, legal, meriting, parent, and health advice from qualified and licensed professionals.
Good, man.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much. Any more questions before? Yeah.
Okay, last question. So you're a new agent or an old agent, you don't have a lot of money, you know what I mean? But you're current, you're making your mortgage, you're making your car payment if you have those things. Getting kids in school, you got $5,000, you don't know what to do with. Where's the first place to start?
If you're qualified and under the income threshold, a Roth IRA is a great place to start.
Yeah.
Roth IRA?
Because that's something we can all do, right? I mean, because sometimes we look at this and it's a little bit frightening. You're like, dude, I gotta have $500,000 to like,
Make something like this worth it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the mindset that most of us share most of the time. It's like, dude, I gotta have all this cash, I gotta be rich. And so maybe that's the take home is, hey, we could sell a couple of homes and have $5 grand and start the process, right?
Yeah.
Or even less.
I love it.
So,
But we gotta do something.
yeah, I mean, I'm not here today to like scare agents at all, but like, if all you do is $5,000 in a Roth IRA, or all you do is say $5,000 a year until you have enough money for a down payment and you buy one rental, like neither of those things are gonna get you your retirement.
Right.
So, like.
Go make more money.
Go make more money, and the most impactful thing you can do to increase your chances of success is to actually just save more money. And if you save more money and then make prudent decisions, you'll do far better. You'll likely do far better than if you, put together a tiny bit of money and just take extreme risk. So.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much.